Ask Shannon if there's any drivers that she hates, and I guarantee you that she will have a list of them. That she's just like, oh yeah, this one driver that wrecked you one time, and you're like, dang, I got over that forever ago. Like, I like that guy. He's cool. I don't know.
All right, well, should we start this thing? Should we just do it? Wing it? We're just going to wing this one.
Let's just do it live.
All right, doing it live. Hello, welcome to Money Lap. I'm Parker Kligerman, joined as always by Landon Cassill. This is our podcast about all motorsports. As always, check out the Money Lap newsletter at themoneylap.com. 3 times a week, Monday morning highlights, news and fun stuff on Wednesdays, news and fun stuff on Fridays. But Landon, we start with the PR lap, and this is where we get to talk about ourselves, our own racing and everything. And just real quickly on the newsletter, though, we are approaching a landmark amount of subscribers. We continue to grow massively, and people are engaging with it at record numbers. So pretty cool to see all that. But we've got the Firecracker 400 tonight. So if you're listening to this, because it'll come out Wednesday morning, we have the Firecracker 400, our massive sim race, the biggest sim race in America. Maybe, I think, the biggest private sim racing event in the world, in my opinion, because it's just cooler than everything else out there. Thrustmaster Firecracker 400, 10-night, 43 starters, vying for one of the biggest prizes. Pretty cool.
Yeah, and if you're looking for a Thrustmaster T818, their new direct drive wheelbase, we got a little surprise for you because there will be a discount coming your way. So code Firecracker, I think all capital letters, you'll get 10% off the new Thrustmaster T818. So that's code Firecracker. So check that out.
Love that. That's awesome. And we've had a really amazing run-up to here. You know, this starts 3 weeks ago, basically, with the prelims. Over 360 competitors that went down to 88 who did first and second round qualifying. There was controversy. There was wrecks. There was drama, which led to the Firecracker 200, where we reserved the right as promoters to have a promoters provisional for the Firecracker 400. This year, we elected to allow the winner of the Firecracker 200 to come to the Firecracker 400, and it was Michael Cozy Jr., defending 2021 champion of the Firecracker 400, winning the 200 to get in the big main show. So he'll start at the back and see if he can become a repeat winner. So pretty cool, awesome story. He's got a huge following, so that was cool to see. But yeah, tonight, 8 p.m. or 7:30 for the pre-race on twitch.tv/eraser_GG. Watch it all there. We'll be there on the broadcast, and it's going to be awesome. So Firecracker 400, come check it out.
We'll be back in our student ties and put on a good show. It's going to be great. We get tons of great storylines. You know, it is pixel car racing, but there are humans involved. So a lot of good human storylines, a lot of excitement, a lot of emotion around this event. We just love putting it on.
It may be virtual, but it's not fake. It's real racing. So with
That's
that,
right.
yeah, thanks. By the way, we have not prepped for this episode at all because we're so busy. So bear with us. You maybe not even notice a difference, in which we're sad because we sometimes put a lot of effort into these things. Anyway, we've got 89 reviews on Apple, which means we're 11 from our goal of 100. Come on, people. Tell your friends, family, your family's friends, and your family's friends' friends' family to review this podcast, listen to it. But we did get one 5-star review that was pretty funny. It said, 2 wild and crazy guys. Sorry, couldn't help myself. Landon and Parker have great insight and I've enjoyed a look from their perspective. 5 stars, guys. From Jay Friss, 1964. So we love that. Spotify, we've got 50 reviews with an average of 5 stars, which is nice. And Brett Silver, who said, my 8-year-old...
Average of 5 stars.
Yeah, we're 5
that's
stars.
That's like a perfect record.
We're perfect. No, we're literally perfect. Out of 5. Yeah, so we're perfect on we only have 5 stars on Apple, too. So, I mean, we're crushing it. Obviously, if you listen to this, if you've come and you know, actually dove into an episode, it seems like we're keeping you around. We have great retention. Brett Silver, my 8-year-old son would love to run a Money Lap sticker on his cart, and he would be more than happy to just get a 5-second mention on the show if he won. Love what you guys are doing. Hey, Brett, Tell your son he just made it on the show. There you go. We'll kind of come up with stickers.
Good luck.
Good luck. And some love for the Thrustmaster T818 that we talked about from some people that were commenting on YouTube about that. Love to see that. And we also got some more YouTube comments. One saying, "Hey, they'd love to see you racing again, man."
Oh man, I definitely would. All love, Landon. Forever my favorite driver. I hope to see you race again, get that win you deserve. I can only imagine how hard this last year's been on you. Yeah, I mean, it's been nice spending time with my family at home, but I do kind of miss the racetrack, and I would love to be back. I'd love to be in victory lane. I'd love to make if nothing else, my loyal fans deserve a race win diecast. Right,
yeah?
Parker?
Where would they get that if you did that?
Yeah. Oh, well, if you're a fan of NASCAR and looking to add to your diecast collection, look no further than SpoilerDiecast.com with one of the largest inventories in the industry and a focus on NASCAR as well as diecast for dirt, sprint cars, IndyCar, and F1. You're sure to find the perfect addition to your collection. And don't forget about their pre-order system, which lets you secure your favorite diecast with a $0 down option. Plus, all orders ship same or next day with free shipping on orders over $20. And if you use the promo code MONEYLAP, you'll even get free shipping and 5% off all orders. So, what are you waiting for? Head on over. Well, you could be waiting for me to win and get my race win diecast, but don't worry about that. Not yet. Head on over to SpoilerDiecast.com. Start building your winning collection today.
Love it. Well done. I'll be at Spoiler Diecast. When you win that race, I'll be one of the first buyers as well, just so you know. So, speaking of racing, I did some racing this past weekend. Once again, we're in the PR laps where we talk about ourselves for an exorbitantly long amount of time. I did the truck race and the Xfinity race. And the truck race got to the top 5, but didn't have the speed to stay there. We just didn't have the speed all weekend in our Henderson Motorsports Chevy. It was awesome. It had Tide and Downey all over it. Looked cool, but it just wasn't that fast. I thought we were going to get a top 10 out of it until Hocevar threw it 3 wide on the bottom into turn 1 on a restart, and which never has worked in the truck since they've been going to Pocono, and didn't work once in that race for anyone, especially at the front. And sure enough, cleared himself into the one who cleared himself, or just smashed into me and smashed us in the wall. So wasn't happy about that. Nope. Xfinity, we had a really great car, at least a top 10 car, in my opinion. We passed a lot of cars at the beginning of the race. So I had a bit of a subpar qualifying effort. And then we played some alternate strategies, got ourselves into position where we'd finish like 6th or 7th if it went green. Then there was cautions, which played into the hands of the 21 and the 98, who were most definitely not going to make it if it went green, and had us sort of have to restart with new tires back in like 15th or 16th, something like that. We got back to the top 10, finished 9th, was passing a bunch of cars when they threw the caution again on the last lap. But overall, solid weekend. We lost points to the 98 because they worked that field strategy and made it to the end. But it's okay. We only lost a couple, so we're still in this. Heading to Road America, which I'm super pumped about. I think it's an opportunity to go win, so that would be cool. But yeah, and then I did the broadcast on Sunday, which I felt good about. It was a solid broadcast. I actually felt like the first half of the broadcast, to be honest, was my first pit reporting of the year since the Rolex 24. And like I nailed everything I did for the first half, and I was like, I am the best. And then I had this like lull where I think my amount of racing I did and everything I've done that weekend caught up me, and like my blood sugar dropped. What's that? Yeah, so
your blood sugar was down.
Something like that, and I had like it was right in the midst of like stage 3's most important section of the stops as the strategies are all played out. And it's funny, like when you have these super strategic races like this, and you suddenly have to like really be in tune with 5 or 6 different strategies happening across 12 or 14 cars. You can get a little messed up, and I had like 1 second where I was like, wait, what is this? What strategy is this car on? Even though I have like notes I'm taking through, it's just, I don't know, sometimes your brain just over 3.5 hours, 4 hours goes in and out. And I was like, I had to drink a Coke real quick and like get myself back in the game. So that was interesting. But yeah, then we finished strong. So it was a solid broadcast in that sense. But it was a long weekend. I headed home to Connecticut after that, which was nice. And, yeah, I think it was overall a successful weekend. If we could have finished in the top 10 in trucks, I would have called it a really successful weekend. So we'll be back in the truck at Bristol. And then, obviously, Xfinity, we head to Road America.
You should have brewed a pot of coffee.
That is correct.
When you were feeling down.
Well, see, what got me and made me so smart for the first half was that, of course, when I woke up, I had Four Sigmatic Think Coffee, which, funny enough, is a supporter of this podcast. The coffee I've talked about having that I love so much, that was the coffee I had in the morning. I'm sure that's what powered me through most of that day on about 6 hours sleep and after racing 2 races the day before and burning 5,000 calories, according to my whoop. And you know what I also have Four Sigmatic coffee for? So when you're listening to this Wednesday morning, I will have already been up for about 3 hours because I'm going to have to get up at about 3:30 in the morning on Wednesday to fly down to North Carolina because I'm still up in Connecticut right now. I'm going to do simulator all morning. We have some meetings. I've got another meeting in the afternoon, and then we're going to do the Firecracker 400 broadcast that night, probably to around, 11:30. So it's going to be a long day. And, of course, I'm going to have Four Sigmatic Think Coffee. If you would like to try Think Coffee from Four Sigmatic, which I find to be the best coffee, and it's made me smarter, which you might be wondering, well, how does it do that? It's because it's infused with functional mushrooms that work to wake up your mind. They say people feel the effects in as little as 7 days. I even use, as you've heard me talk about, their vanilla plant-based protein and their focus products. If you want to try this and their Think Starter Pack, which is 40% off, then using the code MONEYLAP, it'll be another 15% off, so 55% off. Once again, use the code MONEYLAP at foursigmatic.com. That's FOUR, like four, and then Sigmatic, SIGMATIC.com. Use MONEYLAP, get 15% off. It's a deal, Landon.
Perfect.
Rock on. We're good at that.
You nailed it.
We really are.
You nailed it. Oh, my gosh. That's good coffee, too. I love it.
It's good stuff. It's really good stuff. Oh, man.
I could use some right now. Let's talk about Pocono, because I don't think anybody needed a coffee boost to get excited at the end of the race at Pocono. I was just my heart was pounding just watching it.
It was. So there was a ton of strategies happening, which we saw in the Xfinity race as well. Because it's a place, and I think fans should understand this. Because you can pit without going a lap down, it can be treated like a road course in a lot of respects, where it opens up the strategy windows. And that's because, you can effectively pit, stay on the lead lap, which when everyone else pits for the stages, you'll leapfrog them. And you can build that into basically saying, how few stops can I do this on? Well, for the Cup race, it was 3. Mm-hmm. And for the number that you need to be behind the leader to be able to pit and still fill it with fuel and get off pit road was around 10 to, and in the Cup race, it might have been more like 15 seconds. That you could pit and still not lose a lap. And so that just opens up the playbook, and we saw that through this race, but it causes a lot of turnover in the field and sort of the track position of everyone. And it turned into I thought a very enticing show, but the end, Landon, was the thing everyone was talking about, Denny versus Larson, which had everyone booing in the stands.
Well, and Denny pretty much repeated the same move that he had made last year. On who was it that he did the move on? He wrecked him. I think it was Chastain.
Yeah, it's Chastain.
And it's just it's this new move. It's not a new move, but it's unique to the next gen car, I would say, in terms of how often it's being used. The inside car in the next gen has this tremendous aero advantage over the outside car when the right front tire can get in front of the left front tire. So imagine driver hands here, inside car gets ahead of the outside car just by a little bit. It makes the outside car really tight. So then you have a moment in time where you have an aero advantage, you made the outside car tight, and then you have some leverage over them because your car's ahead, and you can try to almost hurt their angle on exit. And to me, the reason this move is almost always ends in some kind of fireworks is because that inside car only retains that advantage for a short amount of time before the advantage flips to back to the outside car, who is going to have a huge momentum run off of the outside down the straightaway and will basically retake the position. So, pretty much Denny, if he's not going to clear Kyle there, he has to sort of kill his momentum somehow. Otherwise, Kyle's just going to clear him down the backstretch.
So
It ends up resulting in some kind of contact or something. I know Denny's claiming they didn't contact, and maybe they didn't, but
that's
you can essentially just run the guy up the racetrack.
Yeah, and I want to get into that for a second because I actually listened to Denny's podcast on this because every driver has a podcast. Kyle Larson now has a podcast, apparently, by the way, which he was talking about this as well. So the new NASCAR midweek content is everyone goes off into their own podcast, has their own discussion about something.
We talk to each other.
Yeah, and then comes back together on the weekends. So we're siloing during the week. You got to make your choices and where you get your content. But the part that's interesting to me is everyone wants to talk about the contact versus no contact. Denny saying they didn't connect, they didn't touch each other. Obviously, Larson saying of course they did, and Denny saying it's just aero. But to me, that's not really the most interesting part. The most interesting part, which I'm sure you're going to dive into because we've had this discussion off podcast before, but that is that the inside car has so much leverage in this position that you mentioned how this hasn't been the case in the past. And one of the biggest things is that this car does not have side force like every other stock car we've raced in the last 20 years, 15 years. And so that inside car is just not as vulnerable to being spun out. Like if he does that in the old car or in the truck or the Xfinity car, if you run that close and Kyle's in that position, you're losing the right rear of the car, freeing the bottom one because you don't have the side. Yeah, the inside car. You're going to lose your right rear and hit into him, and that's just how it goes. For whatever reason, we've seen this at Vegas. We saw this running side by side at all these mile and a halves. They're able to do this because the aero effects of this car are so vastly different than what we've seen in the past. And therefore, the touching part is important to me. This is all about the idea that this is changing what we've known as stock car racing. And so for fans who are seeing this, they're like, whoa, that move is so weird, whatever. It's like, well, welcome to new next-gen NASCAR.
It's a new move. So here's maybe the question that everybody wants to know, because we could analyze the leverage points and why they are what they are. But ultimately, the great debate here is, was that a dirty move or not? And what ultimately constitutes a dirty move? And as we are unpacking this and discussing this, and this is maybe slightly different than what I thought my opinion would have been an hour ago when I discussed it this morning. I spoke with a Cup driver this morning, and you and I have actually already talked about it today. I think that Denny... I don't think Denny did anything wrong here. And I kind of don't think he did anything wrong last year to Ross. I think that maybe... and the reason is he has leverage in that position, right? Yeah, he's not clear. He's not all the way clear on Larson. But he just has so much leverage over Larson that, like... Larson is the one that's at risk. And so, therefore, it's hard for me to say that Denny's doing anything wrong where he put Larson in a position where Larson has the most risk.
So, go ahead.
I need to kind of continue to unpack it. Like, let's just unpack this through our conversation. But it's just like, how did Denny do anything wrong in that position?
So
right, like if he had leverage, use it up. You're racing for the win, and at the end of the day, Larson is the one who has to choose between getting squeezed into the wall. I mean, if Denny just keeps going and maintains that leverage over him, he'll squeeze him in the wall and reach a point where maybe Denny could get pinched into the wall too. But like, I think Larson pretty much has to lift at some point. And that's the leverage that Denny owns, and that's the space that Denny owns there. And that's why, Denny's able to make that move and complete that pass. And I think that's why I think he's in the right.
Let me ask you a question. In years past, different cars, far more dependent on side force. Kyle rolled over in same situation, but now Kyle, because it's different cars, they go into that corner like that, But instead of Denny moving up into Kyle, because the next-gen car allows you to do that, in the old car, Kyle goes down to the right rear of Denny, sucks the air off his spoiler, causes him to get loose. Denny wrecks. Kyle goes on to win the race. Is that a dirty move?
I mean, I guess, I don't know. I think that what I'm really reaching for here is what is a dirty move, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost like I'm making this theory that a dirty move is when you don't have leverage over someone for position and you pretty much just wipe them out in order to gain the leverage.
Yep.
Right? Like you right hook somebody, or they're in front of you, they have track position on you, you follow them down to the corner and you just run them over. Right? Like a dirty move is when you had no position to pass them, or minimal position to pass them, or it was a very narrow, it was a low percentage move and you just resorted to wrecking them or fencing someone in order to make the move.
Yeah.
Right? And so what Denny did to Kyle, I just kind of explained, is like Denny was not in a low percentage position. He was in a very advantageous position over Kyle. Kyle was the one in a low percentage position at that point. The only thing Kyle, needed was for Denny to lose a little bit of momentum so that he could get back to even with Denny on exit and then enjoy the momentum down the backstretch and clear Denny, right? Mm-hmm. But his time was running out. And ultimately, it did run out because he ran it into the fence. And there wasn't even any major contact to do it. Now, the one you're talking about is like, I don't think I don't think it's dirty. It's aggressive maybe, but it's not dirty. I mean, look at how, if someone does that to you early in the race, then there's obviously people are going to take it differently because of the aggression level. But, I mean, you look at how tight Jimmy Johnson and Matt Kenseth raced each other for the win at Texas back in 2007. I mean, that was like one of the greatest NASCAR races of all time, and those guys were on top of each other.
Yep.
With this exact move that you're talking about. That wasn't dirty. That was just, they were just fighting the leverage,
Yep.
So I think to truly figure out, like, for all these debates that are maybe happening on social media and in podcasts and whatever, is like, well, let's define what dirty is. Because dirty can't just be, oh, you wrecked him. Like, well, I think you got to go a little deeper than that. And that's why I'm maybe just throwing this out there to say, what if dirty driving is defined as, wrecking someone when you were in a low percentage situation, when you had little chance, when you did not have leverage over your competitor and you wrecked them anyways.
Yep. I see that, and I agree that the definition of dirty is up for interpretation. I think your summary of it is correct, because there's a bit of intent needed in there as well, right? But it also is like, how close were you to actually being in a position to race this person? In this instance, so I haven't really taken a position here yet. In this instance, I don't think Denny did anything wrong, and I'm in that category because I've just, as you have, watched these races over the last 2 years in this new car, and I sit there thinking, okay, the game has changed a bit. This is different than what we've known as stock car racing, where the car on the outside would have so much control, so much power, so much leverage over that bottom car. If you look at the trucks in Xfinity Series right now, all you have to do is watch one of those races a mile and a half and realize how much power that car on the outside has, how much ability they have to completely affect that bottom car. But now this next-gen car, that is not the case. And so it opens this up right now. And I if you want another example of this during the Pocono race, watch Denny and Kevin Harvick in the third stage, I want to say it was, and Denny was trying to get by Kevin. And Martin Truex was falling behind him, and Denny got so frustrated on the radio because Kevin was squeezing him. But the way this car works, he couldn't open up the corner, and he wasn't squeezing in the way that we get loose in our current cars. It was just not allowing him to open up the corner and to sort of get the run off the corner he needed to eventually get the, and then they could side draft each other down the straightaway, and Kevin would just stay side by side with him. And Denny got so angry when he eventually had to get back behind Kevin. And I'm like, so that's the version of it clean, but the bottom car doesn't come out on top, right? But the bottom car now has the option to do what Denny did, which is that when you're in that side-by-side position, you can creep up and start to take over the power and the leverage over that top car and say, you know what, I'm not taking it anymore. And that's why you've seen this car run side-by-side at Vegas for 5 laps, and Texas and Charlotte, and these races where we're like, wow, this thing's amazing a mile and a half. It's because of that we're seeing this. And so this to me is not, it wasn't a dirty move. It wasn't a, I don't think there was anything wrong done. I think it's a racing incident, but I think it's an incident that to people looks so different because the nature of this car has changed how you race and what the options are. Is he, if Denny...
Well, and I think that...
Well, one last thing. If Denny was the 5,
Yep.
Would he have gotten out of that car and been like, what the hell, and blah, blah? Absolutely, because that's what Denny does. So,
well, sure.
And there's no problem with that. Like, you'd be pissed because you didn't win.
Yeah, I wouldn't, I don't think, I'm not that worried about, like, the role, the reaction of each driver, because, of course, I think Denny is going to be supportive of himself. He's got the trophy, and I think Kyle should be frustrated. At the end of the day, I just think if you really want to analyze, and maybe this is a point, too, off of what you were just saying, which is a really good point, is, like, this is a new feature of this car. Like, obviously, this is a pretty traditional textbook racing move. I mean, I think it's similar to racing moves you see slide jobs on dirt racing and, sprint car racing and non-wing racing and things like that. So it's not a new move. It's just more popular with this next-gen car because of the aero package. And I think the drivers and the fans and the industry are seeing this move over and over again, and we're truly learning what the actual leverage points are, where the limits are. And so I'm not chasing, I don't think there's any sense in chasing people's emotions of like, well, Kyle was pretty pissed and, would Denny be pissed in the same position? It's like, yeah, of course. If you're trying to really understand what's going on in these deals, it's not helpful to try to chase the emotions of the drivers that were in the middle of them.
Yep. One last thing, how they're really good buddies, right?
Yeah, they're like golfing buddies and stuff.
Yeah, like they're close, and I guess their family, they hang out with their families together and everything. And I was like, huh. I always find that interesting when drivers who are friends have run-ins. You and I have not had that run-in, so we don't know how that will work. Like,
what's funny
we'll hash out on this podcast.
Well, it's actually harder on the family members than it is the drivers themselves when this stuff happens. Because I think the drivers being the direct competitors, like we have that innate respect where we get frustrated with each other, but we can recover, right? It's like the wives and girlfriends and the family members that I think have a harder time, managing, like, they're our friends, but we're mad because this happened, and, they get into it. And I think that it's hard for them to be, at times, to separate themselves or be supportive by proxy, I guess, or angry by proxy, whatever you want to call it. I think it's more difficult to manage the ups and downs of those relationships for the spouses and the family members that are all friends than it is the drivers.
That's interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. I wouldn't. I haven't really experienced that. I guess I'm trying to think if I've had like a run-in with someone I'm really close with. I don't know if I really have.
You just need to ask Shannon. Ask Shannon if there's any drivers that she hates, and I guarantee you that she will have a list of them. That she's just like, oh yeah, this one driver that wrecked you one time, and you're like, dang, I got over that forever ago. Like, I like that guy. He's cool. We talk all the time.
100% right.
But like Shannon,
If I ask my mom, she'll be like, yeah, such and such. I'm like, what? I haven't thought about that person in 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's what
exactly. Oh, yeah, I know that my wife and I know that there's like a list of drivers that are just like, nope, don't like that guy. And it's just like, well, that's too bad because I got over that like 4 years ago and him and I are actually cool. So I think those emotional toils are harder on the spouses and family members
Well, two families that might
when
be
it's all
having
intertwined.
yeah, and two families that might be having that discussion are Austin Dillon and Ty Reddick's families after their altercation, where Austin Dillon threw his helmet. Grade A, 11 out of 11 throw, by the way. Didn't connect with the 45.
Well, not really. He missed.
Well, no, I know that. I'm just
It was a
saying.
good throw, but he missed.
Yeah, but I'm saying the throw was like, damn. I mean, he launched the helmet pretty far up the track, but yeah, no, definitely missed the car. So, fail in that sense. Fail in the objective. I was just rating the throw itself as like that's impressive to throw a helmet that far. So,
I mean, it still doesn't beat Tony Stewart's throw at Bristol. I think that was like the all-time best, wasn't it?
oh yeah, that's right up there. And then that helmet went like 20 feet in the air. So.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
interesting. For those wondering, I do not believe Austin Dillon's helmet will be used again. So I don't think whoever his helmet provider is.
He wears Arai helmets, I think. So did he have the guts to call Arai and be like, "Hey, I need another helmet," or did they just order another helmet? Or I mean, I'm sure he's using enough helmets. Maybe they just probably didn't do anything, and he's just I don't know. But I doubt that helmet is used again. That question was asked. What happens in those scenarios? I doubt that helmet was used again,
No, definitely not.
or will be
That's
used
not.
again. I mean,
No, there's maybe they can auction it off for charity or something. Big news in the front of TV ratings, viewership up to 2.808 million people from 2.59 on USA this past weekend. Also, it was the most watched race on cable in 2 years, I think, and it was
Wow.
NBC is off to the most watched NASCAR Cup Series season since 2018. So great numbers
Wow.
and metrics for NASCAR right now in a very, very crucial and important time period in the renegotiation phase for the TV package of NASCAR. So they're winning on all fronts, and the Chicago race, I can tell you, is easily one of the most important races in this sport's last decade, probably, and it was a winning event on all fronts, and I think that will have great ramifications for NASCAR in these coming months. So
I'd love to know what NASCAR, the smart people that look at more data than we do, what they could attribute this to, because it seemed like the first half of the season was a little lackluster. Like there were some wins, there were some low points in terms of viewership, comparisons, but since NBC has picked up the schedule, it's just been better. It's been pretty good across the board, hasn't it?
yeah, it actually has, and we should shout out Pocono was a sold-out camping and sold-out crowd, and the largest crowd I think in 10 years. And I was
They've
being
always
there.
done a good job.
Yeah, it was absolutely massive. So that was cool. The traffic leaving was quite representative of the amount of people who were there, which I'm always happy about. I'll take that, no problem. But to your point, I think it's multiple things. One, the NASCAR brass will tell you that Chase Elliott being out for the time period he was removes a period of amount of viewers. I think when you look at Chicago and how many people viewed that race and how big it was mid-season, I'm sure that has chilling effects, right? It was an exciting show.
Right.
It was a big event.
Well, they've always talked about how big Daytona viewership will have trailing effects.
Yep.
Throughout the entire season.
Yeah, so that's
So
similar.
that could be another good mid-season boost.
Exactly, and I think you can't discount that, right? And then you've had exciting races, which I think helps as well. I'd like to pat my friends at NBC on the back and say that they do an incredible broadcast as well. That we've talked about on this podcast already.
They do.
The amount of cars that they're covering and the emphasis on that, and really treating the sport with respect. And I think one of the coolest things people have said to me is, when they watch an NBC broadcast of this sport, they're like, man, it just feels like it matters. It feels like this race matters. and I think that's the coolest compliment possible. So I did see, and I still think with the Chicago and what's going on, I still think we're just entering this phase, and what we like to talk about here at the Money Lap of if you like cars going in circles with this F1 boom and this F1 popularity boost, with how boring, and no offense to F1, I love F1, and everyone's going to be like, oh, he hates F1s, people like to say about me on this podcast. I don't. I love it. But, with how basically predictable their season has been, how many of those people saw Chicago because that was different in a street course and something they could relate to Formula One, and saw a guy from New Zealand win and thought, I should check out this NASCAR thing? Like, I don't know. I don't know how many are out there, but we see it.
Maybe.
And like we're doing a lot with Money Lap in terms of the newsletter. We're seeing we say it's NASCAR and F1 and all motorsports, and we see a huge amount of interest and a lot of people that fit in different demographics that are interested in all of it. So who knows? I think this, maybe the thesis is playing out that if you got people to like cars going in circles like F1 cars, we could make them like cars going in circles like NASCAR.
I'm with you.
Love it. Hey, one thing in the NASCAR world that I saw out there, producer Josh found this, and this is pretty cool. So I think some fans may have noticed every car has an onboard camera now in the Cup Series, which has been awesome. And there's been a lot of content that they put out.
Awesome. Yep.
Yeah, after the races, and you just get to finally see these things, these different incidents. A fan asked Tim Clark for NASCAR Digital if they could, move those cameras into maybe a better position. And Tim responded on Twitter, I'd agree there's improvements to be made on position, but getting these in place for the full field has been a big win. We'll evaluate in the offseason. So could be some hope of moving those to even a better position, which is cool. But I love it.
Yeah.
I think they're super cool. Joey Logano.
Speaking of onboard cameras.
So Joe Logano.
I would.
Go ahead.
You can go through this.
Okay.
Well, I was just gonna say, Joey. So, anybody? Yeah, go ahead. You do this, and I got a good reaction for it, or I have an interesting, because you and I haven't talked about this yet. So,
all right. So let me give the background. Joey Logano. Did he win stage one? I think he won stage one, or finished second in stage one. I can't remember. Anyway, he won stage one. That's right. So then he restarts a little deeper in the pack, and on the restart gets involved in an incident, goes into the outside wall in the turn one, has all four of his tires go flat, which we've seen with the next gen, and we saw it throughout the Pocono weekend in practice and qualifying, where drivers spin out, they blow the tires, and then they have to go get towed because this car, the way these tires are designed, and the way this car is, it sits on the ground, they can't move. So anyway, Joe Logano had an onboard camera, of course, because all the cars have onboard cameras, which are streamed to the NASCAR app. And some, fans, of course, were watching his onboard as he sat there waiting for the what do you call it?
Safety workers.
Safety workers to come over to his car. As they came over, he's telling them that he needs to get towed. And I think for fans, just imagine being in Joey's position where you're sitting in this car. It's finally, it's been really loud for the last hour and a half. You have your helmet, your earplugs in. You might have ear pucks within your helmet like I do. All the cut noise out. You can't move at all really because you're in that seat so tightly and everything. You've got this net, and then here comes this track worker who's wearing headphones and that sort of thing, and they can't hear you. And then you have cars going by under the caution. Well, basically, Joey was trying to tell the safety workers, I need to be towed to the pits, but they weren't moving fast enough, so he was quoted saying some slightly derogatory things about the safety workers around him, which was very easy to hear on the onboard camera that some fans posted on social media, which, just so they understand, and for the safety workers, it's impossible. Anytime you've been in that position, it's almost impossible to have a conversation because we're screaming at each other and everyone's wearing protective hearing stuff while it's very loud.
And you're mad.
And you're mad. So just, think about how angry you are. You're hot. Your adrenaline is flying through the roof because you just hit a wall, literally, not figuratively. And so your body's in fight or flight mode, and now you're just like, come on, help me out, and it's not happening in a split second. You get very frustrated and angry. I'm not justifying anything. I'm just saying that's what you would be going through as a driver in that time. He was eventually towed, and when he was towed back, this car looked violent because he was still in it. They picked up the rear and dragged the front, and it was like, obviously the front suspension was messed up, and it was shaking and bouncing the car so violently. I have to think for about 2 miles he had one of the worst rides of the weekend on top of all that. So I don't know. What would you like to dive into with this? Because this is a trend right now.
We don't have to dive into it other than I didn't have some hot take off of it because I watched that video and I more was empathetic because I'm like, I think I've done that before. and so I wasn't really going to draw any attention to myself over it. I can remember a point in my career. I don't know exactly what race it was, but I actually changed my tune around safety workers because I was angry when I got out of a car one time, and I don't know what I did, but the safety worker said, "You don't gotta be a dick," and I was like, "Gosh, you're right." So,
well,
it's just tough because you get in those situations as a driver, and you're just pissed, and so and especially when it's like for Joey in that scenario, because he's still alive in the race. Like, that's why he was freaking out. And so it's like, he's still alive in the race. He just has flat tires. He needs to get towed back to the pits. But he wants to get towed back to the pits as quickly as possible so he doesn't lose laps. So it's like, all of a sudden, the safety workers are part of his team.
Yep.
They're like part of his team. They're part of his crew that has to get him towed and back to pit road ASAP. And he is screaming at them to make it happen. It was fun and entertaining, but I also was like, I'm guilty.
I've been there as well, and I've never felt worse than that when I think about, they're in those fire-protected suits as well. It's 1,000 degrees. They're lots of times volunteering their time at certain places, especially at the road courses. And so it's just like, why am I, who am I to be angry at this person? Like, they didn't do anything. They're just doing their job. And I had earlier this year, I think it was Bristol truck race. I was so livid when I went to the infield care center, and I was just very short with the people. And they're just trying to do their job, check you, do the test or whatever. And I got the next, I almost had like that remorse. Maybe 2 hours later, my adrenaline calmed down and everything, and I just felt awful. And I was like, hey, and I think I said to the nurse, like, hey, I'm sorry. Like, I really, I didn't mean to be that way. So we've all done it probably at one point in time, but you don't feel good. And I'm sure Joey, has seen that and didn't feel like, anyone deserved those sorts of comments. And, it's just how it is. But you're in the heat of competition, and I did have an in-car camera this weekend. And I think it's a nice reminder of, like, if those things are in there, they're always on. So
that's right.
And they hear everything. Speaking of almost on, or always on, Andretti, Adam Stern, said that basically Andretti is still focused on trying to get an F1, but a recent move in NASCAR by its major sponsor, Gamebridge, is indirectly serving as an experimental step into the stock car series for Andretti, per People Familiar, which we have talked about, right? Which they have, made this sponsorship announcement with Spire, and how there is thoughts that is actually more of an ownership move than just a sponsorship move. So we'll see if Andretti and NASCAR, or the Andretti name, does finally enter NASCAR. As you may have seen a couple weeks ago at Mid-Ohio, Marco Andretti drove the Spire truck sponsored by Gamebridge in Group 1001. So, kind of adds credence to those rumors. We'll see.
I'm sure it wasn't because Gamebridge just wanted to try out the NASCAR marketing platform.
Well, if they were already on Nick Sanchez's truck. So, They're one of the partners of Nick Sanchez in the Rev Racing program. So I think they've already got their taste there. I don't know if you really need to double up to understand. So I would think, per people familiar, whoever they are.
They're building some relationships.
Yeah, these people who are familiar. I like that term, per people familiar. Who are these? Why are they familiar with this? And who are you?
Oh, man.
Let's move out of NASCAR land. Should we?
Let's go to Iowa.
Should we go to Iowa? What do you know about Iowa?
Yeah, well, that was actually was a good transition, like kind of using Andretti to take us to IndyCar.
Yes.
And Joseph Newgarden. Pretty good weekend.
Oh my gosh, man. He's incredible at that place. He led 341 of the 500 laps in both races, winning both of them.
Yeah, I mean that's quite domination. I could never. Iowa is one track that I feel like in Q trim, fully wide open, would be pretty challenging in an Indy car. But with the tire fall off, and actually having to lift, and I would imagine an Indy car is really fun to drive on a short oval where you have to lift.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to feel like slick track go-kart racing or something at 200 miles an hour.
Yeah, I mean that race. The thing that gets me is how dominant some cars are at oval races in IndyCar and how far some are off. And I really think it's because they're on such a fine edge, right? If you've ever driven Indy cars on iRacing, or driven oatmeal cars are very, very much on edge. And in road courses,
any race car,
but those cars are
any race car on an edge like that.
Yeah, it means if you're off though, like you see it where they go 7 laps down, 10 laps down, and it's nothing the driver can do if the car is just too loose and it won't connect. You just have to go slower,
right? And
so you can be so far off because you're going so fast too that the laps are so short, right? So I think that's a point of like why that just looks so difficult. I will say this: whenever I watch. Like, we used to watch Richmond in IndyCar. Short ovals, to me, I don't know. I feel like it looks so cool, and it would be so cool to see in person. But sometimes I watch these races on TV, and I think, like this, it would be hard to race, if you know what I mean. Like, they're going so fast in such a small space, and they can't touch. And so it's just like, this is hard to race each other, sort of thing, if that makes sense.
You know what that makes me think of? It makes me think of RC car racing, where like the idea behind RC car racing on like pan ovals and stuff is really cool. Like pan cars on ovals, like I want to see it so cool, and the cars are really fast and it seems awesome. But then sometimes the racing is just hard to follow. And I feel like the best RC car racing is when the cars are actually a lot slower and they can actually race around each other and they're more forgiving.
That you mean basically...
That was just kind of
basically NASCAR.
It was like a comparison that came to mind. Yeah. Yeah, stock car racing. Cars are slower, slide around more, slower reaction times, better racing.
Yep. Like it. Well, it was a big weekend for Newgarden. Aside from just getting the 2 wins and absolutely dominating, he closed the gap to Alex Palou for basically the first time this year. He has done it, and he reduced the lead from 117 points to 80 points. So the championship still up for grabs for Joe New, as Townsend Bell, I think, would say. So we'll see as that championship battle continues. But congrats to Joe on his dominating Iowa. And Hy-Vee, by the way, that event, I don't know if you paid attention, but the way they've wrapped that track in temporary stands and the big concerts they do and everything, really an incredible
awesome. Their activation is so good.
Yeah. So really, really cool. Formula One. Hey, guess what?
What?
Max Verstappen won.
What?
Yeah, I know.
Oh my gosh. Wow. It's pretty interesting though. Lewis got the pole.
Yep.
And, obviously the McLarens are picking up some serious speed. But the Red Bull is just they're still half second faster. It's a half a second. And I saw some data on Twitter today. They're just not falling off. Like they have less tire degradation than anybody else in the field. And so, the best chance that any of these guys have is in qualifying, which maybe that'll make the sprint races interesting this weekend. Where are they at? Belgium this weekend? I'm not sure.
Check that.
But I think they have a sprint race this weekend.
Okay.
But anyways, yeah, it's like the best chance anybody has is in qualifying. Last couple of weeks, we've seen some close qualifying sessions, a couple tenths here and there, but then ultimately 15, 20 laps into the race, it's clear that Max has a half-second advantage.
No doubt. And I thought it was really cool qualifying for Lewis Hamilton to get the pole, which I was a little shocked. I was like, okay. But I feel like what you're saying is kind of like what we've done for the last 6 months, which is try and figure out where their advantage is. But to be honest, it's just about everywhere. When you have half a second, like they're like, oh, well, here's the weakness. Yeah. Here it is. And it's like, well, is it? Or did they just not tune it up that point for that set of corners? Like they just have a massive advantage right now.
It's like when there's been times in post-race analysis and NASCAR stuff in my own racing where we'll break down the entire field corner by corner and segment by segment, and it's a good way for drivers to analyze like what part of the corner they should prioritize. And sometimes trends will stick out where you're like, oh, here's the 5th place car that or all the cars in the top 5 were really good on corner entry, or all the cars in the top 5 were really good on corner exit or through the middle of the corner. It'll help you kind of identify, like, next time we go to this track, we should focus on corner entry or we should focus on corner exit. But then sometimes there's like a winning car that, pretty much any race that Kyle Larson won in 2021 was like, he was the best car on entry, exit, middle, down the straightaway, just the whole thing. And so it's like, well, it's kind of hard to analyze that. We just need to be faster.
Oh, man. Yeah, I love sometimes racing. You have an advantage. You have an advantage. You were correct, by the way. They're going to Belgium and Spa-Francorchamps with this sprint race as well. So we'll see if that makes a difference. Danny Ricciardo back, as our other buddy Joey would like me to say, Ricciardo. He'd be so excited.
Good news, bad news, Danny.
Good news.
Good news is you're 2 tenths faster than your teammate. Bad news is you're the 2 slowest cars on the track.
But good for him. That had to be a big boost to come in there and be quick like that. I have to think, mentally, that's going to do wonders for him. And he's
that would carry his confidence through for sure.
Oh yeah, big time. Aston Martin, the opposite of McLaren, losing pace to the field right now, not keeping up the development potentially. So we'll see if that becomes a consistent trend as we go through these summer months. But from what we're seeing, they are falling behind, and the chances of us seeing a Fernando Alonso victory are falling as well. So we'll track that. Big controversy on the podium as well. Lando Norris.
I saw this.
Yeah, this was big in the Money Lap newsletter Monday highlights. Broke Max Verstappen's trophy by accident. What's that about?
So I saw that the trophy is like 40,000 euros or something and handmade. It was broke. Oh gosh.
Well, it's broke. It's broken, and well, they're not broke because they're F1 drivers in 2023, so they're making lots of money.
I think they're all doing fine.
They'll be just fine. So we'll look forward to seeing Belgium. I'm going to do my best to watch a lot of that again this weekend, but we'll see if your theory. So if you're listening to this and you believe Landon's theory that Red Bull could potentially be beat in the sprint race because now it's just tire deg that is their advantage, let us know on Twitter or send us a message on the Money Lap And be sure to subscribe at themoneylap.com. But I want
We're
to know.
just looking for a way for Red Bull to be beat.
Yeah, give us a reason why they will
Well,
be
actually,
beat.
you know what? I'm just rooting for greatness at this point. So I kind of want to see Max win out the rest of the season. I
Oh
love
my
seeing
God.
history be made.
Do you think it's possible?
I mean, why wouldn't? What's he on? 7 in a row already?
It would be.
Why not?
No, I know it's possible. I'm just saying this is, 1988 was McLaren won 15 of 16 races. You had Michael Schumacher and Ferrari. What did they do?
He hasn't finished worse than second this season. I'm pretty sure.
And I'm trying to remember Michael Schumacher's or the Ferrari season. I'm trying to remember the season. We got to get producer Josh on this one. Well, yeah, Perez won a race this year. Was it Baku, right?
And then fell off the face of the earth.
He left everyone. Oh,
He won
man.
2.
Oh, Perez won 2.
Saudi Arabia, Azerbaijan.
Yeah, Baku and Azerbaijan. Saudi Arabia. I mean, they've all look. I can barely keep up my own races this season. I'm at. By the way, speaking of which, just to give you an example of how much racing we're doing. I'm doing this year with 44 races on tap. The most races I've run in the last 9 years has been like 16 in a season, or 18 maybe max maybe 18. And I'm at like 24 already, and it's July. So my brain doesn't even know where I'm at. Yeah,
Those are the best years. Those are the best years, though. I love those years where I'm racing a lot.
Mm-hmm. It's fun. It would just need some better results, especially on the truck side. Haven't really had a finish this year, basically. So can't get any worse.
Let's talk about engines.
Yeah, let's talk about engines.
We were talking about engines way early in Money Lap, and now we're revisiting the V8 Supercars engine program. So tell me about, because you know more about these than I do, but the V8 Supercars, they've approved the Ford engine change.
Correct. So basically, we've talked about their Gen 3 car, which is their version of the next gen, more of a spec version car. Mm-hmm. And they also have, unlike what we've done in NASCAR, they also have a more spec sort of engine design between each manufacturer basically has an engine design, and then one engine's builder is working on both, and then the engines basically get randomly assigned to each car of that manufacturer. So Ford for Chevy, and essentially you either get, if you're a Ford, you just get your Ford engine. If you're Chevy, you get your Chevy engine. But one thing that's been from the start of the year, Ford has complained that they are not aligned with the Chevys, and that there's been a large discrepancy between them. And they thought for a while it was electronic, so they did some ECU changes and some mapping changes for the Fords. But now they have approved a parity change. And so basically they're approving this to continue to, try and match up the parity. And it's basically the throttle body. And they're trying to align the throttle bodies between the two engine manufacturers or engines. So we'll see. I mean, Supercars has done this for years, where they do this, which we do in NASCAR as well, but they've been very public about it, which is this sort of parity testing. And they do these, all these aero tests, and then they've now doing it with the engines as well. And their whole hope is to try and make the cars basically equal, right? And so they're trying to strive for that right now with this Gen 3 car, and now they've gone as far as to making an engine change, which they had avoided up to this point.
I love what they're doing. I think this is cool. I think that the random draw engine builder, single source engine builder, I think that's cool for the team side. I understand why they play this parity game, but there's only one way to truly have fair hardware across the board, and that is for all of it to be the same. Yep. So in my mind, I would be corrected on this from someone more knowledgeable, but it's in my mind, the only reason they're playing this game of like Ford has their engine and Chevy has their engine, but then we try to make it equal, which to me is just so. You're just playing this game of like these manufacturers where you just don't want to piss them off, right? You're trying not to. You're trying not to alienate some manufacturer that has a huge budget that they're willing to spend in your sport, and them have to go back to their executives and say, "Well, I don't need 25 million or 50 million of this money or however much it is, 10 million, because the sanctioning body is dictating our engines now." Where if they truly wanted true parity, that's what they would be doing. They would just say all the engines are the same. Ford and Chevy, you just change valve covers, or we just run different bodies on the car, so you have identity. But like, who really cares what engine's in the car? Because if we really cared what engine was in the car, and we were doing it for the purpose of engine development, we wouldn't be trying to create parity, right? We would let Ford have a superior engine or Chevy have a superior engine, because that is motorsport in terms of development motorsport, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just interesting that like motorsports globally, and we talked about this probably a couple months ago on the podcast. It's like motorsports globally is going down this trend of spec racing for the purpose of parity, for the purpose of equal racing and competitive racing for the show, whatever you want to call it. And the manufacturers that are involved are really just extracting the marketing components out of it, not necessarily the manufacturing development components out of being in motorsport. Does that make sense? Am I right?
Yeah, no, it does. And I think you really do have two choices, and that is you either go the spec route, which we have in Truck Series, right, where everyone runs the same Ilmor engine, and then runs different bodies, but every manufacturer, every car, every truck is running the same engine. Well, and then there is some issues there where like you have the well-funded teams that buy, say 100 engines, and they dyno all of them, and they take the top 10% of them, and then the other ones they resell, right? So like, even when you have a single engine supplier, if you leave it where they can do what they're doing, where it's not handed out like Supercars does, you'll still have teams finding an exploit, right? But my point being, you either do that, or if you're going to have such controlled engine specifications, you might just want to go down that spec path and stop spending money in something that's not innovative, unless like we've had this discussion, which is like if, say in the NASCAR Cup Series in the next couple years, it's like, hey, we're going to aim for X, it's the BOP style of IMSA, which is like, hey, you can bring a turbocharged V6, a naturally aspirated V8, a turbocharged V8. You could bring a 4-cylinder turbocharged, whatever you want to bring, but here's the parameters that we're going to try and keep you within, right? And that's that BOP style of allowing different engines in development and that sort of thing, but trying to keep the competition level. So it's funny. You've got those differing ideologies, and there's not really anyone or anywhere that's sort of like, hey, just run what you brung. Like WEC maybe does that a little bit, Formula One slightly, obviously, in terms of is within a certain specification that there's development that teams or manufacturers have done over the others, but I don't think there's really anywhere right now that's just like, hey, let's open it up, and I don't think there will be. I think that era is beyond us.
Well, it'll come back because everything old becomes new again.
That's true.
So we will. It might take 10 years, it might take 20 years, it might take 50 years, but there will be another era of motorsports where they say, no rules, run what you brung.
Probably electric.
The thing I always say is we either have too many rules or not enough. Meaning we either have too many rules, it's too hard to manage, it's creating, too much controversy, too many things to officiate, alienating certain groups or creating, regulatory moats basically around the legacy teams. We just need to get rid of all the rules. Or we don't have enough rules, meaning we just need a full-on spec racing series where everything is completely outlined to spec, and the cars are all built equally, and it's up to the driver and the crew chief on race day to dial it in.
Yep.
Both of those theories, I think, can create compelling racing product.
We'll see. It's going to continue to be a discussion because I think all these racing series are continually going through and evaluating and trying to keep interest. But whatever's happening right now, it seems to be working for NASCAR. Speaking of which, they are headed to Richmond in the Cup Series, which has been a tough one in terms of the entertainment category. Strategy could be open once again. We've seen strategy play out over those the way the tires fall off in that place, which could be interesting. And as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, Xfinity is going to Road America. So any thoughts on either of those that you want to dive into?
Well, Richmond, I mean, one of my favorite racetracks, but man, it's been a snoozer as of lately. So it'll be interesting to see. Hopefully, we see some good racing. But one thing that I feel like my only confirmation on this is from you, because I don't know how public it's been, but did they move the Cup new aero spoilers front splitter test to Richmond since New Hampshire got rained out?
Great point. Yes. So I was told at New Hampshire that it was moved to Richmond. So I think it's happening this coming Monday after Richmond.
I am actually more excited about that test being at Richmond than at New Hampshire.
Why is that?
I think that'll be interesting. So, well, first of all, I think Richmond has had the worst short track racing for a while. And especially in the next gen car, it's been really tough. And I think the track is smooth enough and predictable enough and consistent enough. That's part of the reason why the racing has been just tough, because the aero, the short track aero package has just been, there's not a lot of variability. Even New Hampshire, as tough as it is being a short track, like the different banking changes and the traction compound that's not been reapplied but still seems to be affecting the racetrack. That track has had some good racing on it, right? But Richmond hasn't. So I think what a better place to test your new aero package than a track that has seemed to have been struggling with it.
You definitely are not wrong in saying that it's just been a struggle in the entertainment of that place. Seal it up, put sealer on it, do something, repave it. I don't know. Put dirt on it, Put dirt on it. There you go. Let's not put dirt on Bristol. Let's cover Richmond in dirt. That's the move. That's the big brain move. I'm saying I'm leaving it there on that. I think with that,
Richmond dirt, got it.
Watch the Firecracker 400. If you're listening to this on Wednesday, it's tonight, 8 p.m. E-Racers Twitch. Check us out there. Biggest event in sim racing. Someone will walk away with a massive prize pool, and if Alec Martinez can go from the back to the front in the Wits RC Racing Challenge, he will win the Thrustmaster Firecracker 400. He will win a massive prize pool of over $10,000. So come watch us there.
It's gonna be a good race. Awesome.
See you there. Hey, before you go, please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Also, click the bell icon below to be alerted to our latest videos. We also request that you let us know every single thing that we did wrong in this video or prior ones in the comment section below. We might just go through and answer them, or you'll make it to the next episode of the podcast or our next video. Also, subscribe on your favorite listening platform to be able to listen to this podcast on the go. And subscribe to our newsletter at themoneylap.com to get the best 5 minutes in motorsports delivered directly to your email inbox every Tuesday and Thursday. Thanks for watching. Right now, you look like an insurance salesman.
With a polo on.
Your hair went from the crazy, like the perfect thing, to like now it's like it might be fake.